Today's Unedited Yap is going to be about playing the damn cards that you buy. The whole idea versus near min and keeping things perfect versus playing them and how you shuffle them. The balance between it all. And how ultimately I think a lot of people over time might be losing the idea of just, it's a card game. Yes, it's a trading card game. It's a collectible card game in some ways, but it's a card game. It's meant to be played. And I think there is a balance to be struck. I'm not hard on one side versus the other. I may be pro proxy on this channel, but in many ways that is against Wizards of the Coast policy. So I see many of my other creators tell me, before I join their streams and stuff to say, don't say the word proxy, say like alternative or something like that, right? Because they want to be pro Wizards and make sure Wizards sponsors them, which is fair enough. But when it comes to actual cards themselves, I think there's a real obsession, in some ways fair, so let's talk about that portion first, of keeping your cards in good condition. So we know the basics of this, right? So we want to be able to legibly read our cards. We don't want that run over by a car, squished up in a backpack type of old 1990s, early 2000s type of vibe that we get from that type of Magic era. We don't get that anymore. We want to be able to read and play our cards. The art on them is a big aspect to it, even now being diluted by the whole Universes Beyond aspect, where a lot of times when you play a game of Commander, which is always a great example, you sit across from some cards, you don't know what they are, and you don't recognize a lot of them just because of the sheer amount of cards entering the format. So it's more important than ever for certain markers on cards, the visibility of its mana, the visibility of its power toughness, the art, anything that's a visual cue to you to be consistent. When it comes to constructed formats, that's a little bit easier to understand because when it comes to tournament rules, a lot of times you tend to avoid like alternate art treatments. A lot of them tend to be foils, so you don't want your cards bending to appear marked. And also you tend to come up against similar strategies, right? So even though the art might be unrecognizable, you realize you're sitting up against Dimir Frogtide and the frog might have alternate art, but you're like, oh, okay, that's 2 minutes to do. Okay, that's just like, that's Psychic Frog, right? So you have that consistency. So having it be legible is key. Now, the other part of it is holding value. And this is where like it becomes a little blurred, right? So if you have a card, right, that you are maybe playing in standard, for example, a card that might rotate out, and a couple months before it goes away, you're still maybe deep into an RCQ season or something like that, and you want to get rid of the deck because you're looking to build into other pieces that you feel like are just going to stay long term. You want to sell it to the RC folks that want to kind of spike and qualify for the Pro Tour now, so you get your value out of it. But when it comes to a longer format that doesn't necessarily rotate, such as maybe Modern, you have cards that hold value. Heck, if you go to the Legacy format, you have a whole list of cards that will always be increasing in value in some way, shape, or form because collectibility is there. So where do you strike the balance? Legibility is a big one. Tournament play is another one, making sure that your cards don't bend, fold, or don't crease the sleeves that you're putting in, because that's also another aspect to it, right? The fact that we now have created a whole industry around different parts of our accessories, not only deck boxes to keep our cards safe. It's not just about rubber banding your cards anymore, but also tournament playability and sleeves, making sure your sleeves are consistent. Also the inner sleeves, creating a seal to protect your cards. We've seen plenty of tests of the water test where a nice tight seal on a certain type of sleeve will make it so water doesn't damage your cards or any other gunk doesn't get anywhere. So if it does fall out of your hands into a pool of water that maybe your water bottle spilt and you're just not trying to clean up right now, all of that in mind, these things protect the quote unquote value of your cards. And with that, there's so many cards out there that some people have purchased to be that eternal piece. So for example, you might have really gone into a CDH deck. You've bought all the pieces for it. You might have even started to foil it out. These are your eternal pieces. This is the deck of your choice. You're always going to keep it blinged out. This deck is going to stay as it is. And in that case, do you really care about the value, right? Like you're quote unquote like burning money in that sense, but you've spent that money for a purpose. The purpose is technically being met. So in an example for Commander, that's going to be a deck that technically speaking is always going to be viable. Or even if there is a quote unquote better Commander in that archetype or better cards that come down the line, you can always buy them, replace them. But I guess then that argument becomes, if you have for example, a Mox Opal, you bought it for your CDH deck, you got it in whatever artifact deck. But then that card no longer becomes viable because we power crept the game to a point where Mox Opal is no longer quote unquote good enough. That'd be a wild situation, but follow with me here. You bought a foil version of it, a masterpiece, for example, and you now go to sell it, right? And you realize, oh, I played this a bunch, I bent it, I've dinked and dinged it. Like it was near mint when I bought it, but now I've lost value on it. I mean, to be fair, didn't you make your value on it, right? I think a lot of people forget that some things that you purchase in life are meant to be used, and the time you use it for is what you paid for. The resale value isn't the one for one. And I think this is where we get into the whole idea of like personal economics and you know, people's finances and the toxicity around it. You know, the people that the two opposite sides of the spectrum, where you have the big spenders, the people that are irresponsible with their money and are always very materialistic, looking for the next big thing, or on the opposite side, the super frugal people, which is another level of toxicity, the people that don't live in the moment and enjoy themselves. There's a balance to be struck because under capitalism, you do need to spend. People say you don't need to. That's not true, right? You can't all move to the cheapest state in the United States and buy the cheapest food and all that stuff. Some people don't have access to that, right? The healthcare is not that great in the United States, for example. And so you may not actually be gaining the benefits of moving to a certain place because yes, your food's cheaper, but then this part of it, you know, maybe your healthcare isn't as accessible on that opposite front. So there's so many parts about, you know, buying something or making a big financial decision that has so many ups and downs. So if you're going to make that decision and you're doing it for the sake of your own personal enjoyment, you're buying a magic card to be able to enjoy and play with, your intended purpose was to be able to, again, I'm using Commander here, play it in a deck, you get your enjoyment out of it. In the extreme example of playing it for something like a CDH deck or a theme deck where you absolutely love the Commander, it's something personal to you. The games that you've spent for it should be able to pay off that, right? The gathering, the memories that you make are worth a lifetime, especially if you have them recorded and your memory ebbs and flows with time. You will be able to call back on these memories and realize a couple $100 got you some crazy fun memories that you can almost never lose with the friends that you have. But then there's the other side of it where you purchase certain cards, you want to be able to play with them, and you feel like you haven't had the time for it. And this is the side of the argument that I have a hard time going up against, because maybe a deck that you just recently purchased is just banned out of nowhere. And this is like a big benefit to scheduled BNRs, where you can buy a deck ahead of a scheduled BNR or right after one and realize it's going to be played for a little bit. And maybe you buy a shell for it. Maybe you get a good research on the metagame. You're just entering Modern, for example. We just had the big ban of Mox Opal, and we're trying to understand, or not Mox Opal, I should say, Underworld Breach. Mox Opal was in that deck, but we just had that big ban, and you realize, hey, you know what? I want to buy into this strategy. It seems like it wasn't really part of the conversation or on their radar, and so I'm going to buy into this like top 10 deck. It's like 8th or 9th in the metagame, and I should be perfectly fine. But then maybe down the line, because a metagame factor is shifting, a new card gets printed out of Final Fantasy that completely breaks that deck open. A lot of people right now, I'm recording this on the same day that we just had these Saga changes, and a lot of people talking about Urza Saga right now. I imagine that card will spike a little bit in price. We have a lot of Amulet players just kind of screaming about how, you know, big buff to Amulet, but also we now have a tutorable Amulet of Vigor. It's a 2-mana legendary creature that allows lands to enter untapped. And so with that and Green Sun Zenith, there's a lot of playability around this deck. So does something get banned out of it? I'm not sure. It's part of this conversation where kind of Amulet Titan has always been legal and never looked at throughout so many modern histories out there. It hasn't been banned since Bloom at that point, right? And so when it comes to a deck fading away really quickly, that's pretty fair. And that, I feel like, is a bigger issue of purchasing a card and then not having its return value. But then I feel like you made that purchase with that understanding. I think a lot of people make these purchases without understanding the downfall of it. And that's just part of being responsible or accepting the risk of it. When you purchase a house or something as simple as purchasing a bike, you accept the fact that maybe some freak accident can happen and the shingles off your roof fall down and come down and slice your tires on your bike or something. I don't know, something heavy falls off the roof and dings your bike. Like, it's not going to stay in perfect condition forever. These are like the people that purchase brand new cars that are like, it's almost never a good decision, because the car market the way it works is that it just gets devalued. The car gets devalued the minute it pulls out the lot, because now driven, the engine's used a little bit, the door has been open and closed a couple of times. And so again, you don't have that resale. Around the COVID time, that was a little bit different. We had the price of microchips and everything increase, which led to an increase of the price of cars to be able to kind of handle their electronics. But also there was a bigger issue with like manufacturing companies and world supply and all that stuff. So those are different factors. But all in all, showcasing that there are many purchases in life that a lot of people make, or I hope they're making, with the understanding that you have to accept the risk. And yes, you're not expecting your house to flood. So for example, myself in Toronto, I'm not expecting one of the Great Lakes to just flood out of nowhere and come up the highland and like flood up my place or whatever further down the line, right? There's plenty of people maybe by the lakes like the Toronto Islands and stuff that might get hit first, but these are the type of things that you accept when you purchase things like this. And so that's why I feel like when you purchase like these expensive Magic cards, if you're not doing it for the express sole purpose of collecting, maybe you have a piece of artwork from a great Magic artist and now you have like a foil copy of that card, you frame it up and like, that's cool, right? Like over time it could lose value, but you already are going into it with the understanding that you got this signed, you really like this art, you're not really in it for the value, you're not looking to resell. So why does the value of the card matter in terms of playability? Why are we so, kind of obsessed with near mint versus, lightly played and everything? And that's of course the obsession if we're looking to trade it away. But I think if we're looking to permanently play with the card and we're not looking to be transient with it, right? Like there are people that are always constantly looking to switch decks, and that's also another fair angle to be at as well. You want to try out different things. You have the resources to do so. But when you purchase into a bunch of cards and you want to stick to it, if you're just looking to like constantly keep to its value, I don't know. I feel like in Constructed, it's a more valid argument, because metagames change over time and things get banned, things get unbanned, and the playability of certain cards and cards by proxy, just all of it becomes playable and unplayable. So I feel like that argument is a little bit looser. But now with Commander being the most played format, I think a lot of people are obsessed with, like keeping their cards in near mint, like because you're meant to play with them, right? Like what is the point here? If you didn't buy this card that you spent so painstakingly long to just build up a 99 and, test out your mulligans and all that stuff to be able to purchase this card, and then you're obsessed with keeping it near mint, like I feel like that's missing the point. And sure, this isn't just about like, giving your deck to someone else to shuffle and they just like the worst way possible that they can shuffle it, they're doing it. I'm not sure that's the point. But then even I think about it in the extreme of like vintage decks, right? Where people have like Black Lotuses and stuff like that. Like, is your vintage deck supposed to be a kind of, is it supposed to be a retirement plan, similar to how the housing market in many places has just become one of the worst parts about capitalism in general, how so many people of an older generation have their whole equity and financial future based around their home, and they might want to move into a care home and they're going to pay that off. They're going to pay for that by selling off their home and all that stuff, making it wholly inaccessible. And so when you make decisions like that, is that same decision going into your Magic cards? Like, I guess you could say that about vintage, because a lot of the cards are just going to eternally increase in price as long as people are playing the game, right? Black Lotus is never going to be reprinted. I'd say never, but maybe one day in the future. So I'm not sure where I land on it in terms of specific solutions, but I'm definitely like just pro play, right? Like use your cards, right? I'm not here to resell them. That's why I don't purchase a lot of cards. A lot of decks that I build in Commander, I proxy if I really like the deck and I want to build it out. So I have about 4 decks out of maybe my 10 that you're seeing like right here, right? So I have 10 decks right there in these little cases. Now, if I purchase a certain amount of cards, it's going to be for a deck that I like. And there's about 4 of them that I have completely built out. Like they're all paper and everything. And maybe over time I might build like buy like a cool foil or an alternate art or something like that. But the other ones are all proxy. And so I feel like that's like a great way to kind of loosen your morals around like playability. Because if it's really hard for you to just like bend a card or play a card, ultimately remember you're playing a card game, right? Like you're not playing around with the stock market, really. Like you're not playing around with a bunch of weird NFTs. They're all recreatable. It's not destroying it is kind of destroying the environment. We are working with a luxury hobby. So let me not get too ahead of myself on that front. You should be able to just play your cards. Let's not get too obsessed with how near mint things are. There are situations where you might be a little bit more transient in your deck or your card choices. That's fair. I just feel like, again, with the game being majority commander, I think a lot of people are a little too obsessed with how perfect condition their cards are, and maybe should focus on playing them or learning the combos in their deck a little bit better instead of like how many sleeves I have on this deck or switching out your sleeves. But also switching out your sleeves is also pretty fair. If they're chipped and bad, you shouldn't be playing with marked sleeves. Even if it's like a casual commander game, like if you have a marked card, like I might be pretty chill with it in Commander, but then if that mark card is a Craterhoof Behemoth, I'm gonna be like, switch out your sleeve. Don't do that. You know, if the mark card's like a basic land, like whatever, I whatever, right? But if it's like a Craterhoof Behemoth, I'm calling you out on that. Also, when it comes to constructed formats, yeah, you don't want mark cards in general. But that's not even necessarily like the card health. Most of the time, if people are playing in a tournament or something, they probably have their decks double sleeved and all that stuff. So the mark cards really come down like to the sleeve itself. It's not necessarily a conversation about the copy of a card. I remember one of the big things I didn't do way back when. This was like a funny moment I think back to. I don't know what I would have done with it, but I remember face-to-face games. This was years ago. This was like 2016 maybe, right? Something like that, 2017. And there was like a heavily played Taiga for 75 Canadian dollars. 75, right? What is that in USD? Like $2? 75 Canadian dollars. I was like, oh, maybe I should purchase it. But I wasn't like working like that. I was still like, I was still in school and everything, just like close to finishing off. And oh Lord, I thinking about it. Like it would have been a really irresponsible purchase for my financial situation at the time, but it would have been really cool to earn something like reserve list at that time. No one was really playing Taigas like that in Legacy to my knowledge. But it was just like something cool. It was like a card that I didn't really care about that was heavily played, but it was one that like the condition of it didn't matter because of course there was a finite amount of them in the world out there right now. And so, you know, it'll only increase in price from there. So it'd been a cool purchase to make. It won't go down necessarily unless people aren't playing the game anymore, but I'm rambling at this point. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you feel about, how do you feel about playability versus collectability? Are people too obsessed with kind of keeping cards near mint and, making sure that their cards stay and have value and are not comparing it to the situations in real life? Or do you think people are like largely aware and I'm kind of missing some type of big factor here? Because there's not lost on me if I'm being ignorant of something. I do purchase Magic cards and I understand the value of them. I personally don't have a Magic card over $100, but that's because I just haven't purchased it. I would love to own a card over $100. It's just, I got bills to pay. And so if I buy a card that's like $500, I have to financially justify it to the shared bank income of, my wife as well. Like that's her money legally as well that I am now nonsensically spending on like whatever, a nether void that I'm going to play in like one day. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? So that's just where I'm at right now. But it's not like I'm against it. I would love to buy expensive cards. It's just, I don't have the financial wherewithal, or I should say I do have the ability to. It's just not a responsible thing to do. So regardless, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. This is me as someone who may not have like the most expensive cards out there versus some of you that do. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that playability? Do you plan to sell those cards eventually down the line? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below.